Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Like always, get ready to catch up on the biggest international news of the week. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get to detailed reports, a look at the top stories this week. Ukrainian crisis escalates after Crimea's parliament votes to join Russia. Obama urges a diplomatic resolution. Moscow vows strong action against sanctions. Beijing's patience with Pyongyang tested yet again, expresses concern over North Korea missile near miss with Chinese passenger plane. Curtains are down on one of the most turbulent periods in Birmingham City's history. Owner Carson Young jailed for 6 years for money laundering. And later on World Panorama, a special report on the glitziest award shows of the year, the Oscars. Our top story. The political crisis in Ukraine that has now entered its fourth month is rapidly reaching a point of no return. Territorial fissures in the country along political, linguistic and ethnic lines, the real possibility of a civil war and the emergence of the southern Ukrainian Republic of Crimea as a potential international military flashpoint are among the different aspects of the current situation in the country, which is the second largest state in Europe. The focus has shifted from Kiev to the southern province of Crimea, where the interim government that deposed former President Viktor Yanukovych has not been recognized. With its complex ethnic mix and historical past, the region has traditionally had strong ties with Russia. We will be discussing in detail what's happened in the past few days and where is Ukraine headed. For that, I welcome Anuradha Chenoy, professor at the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thanks so much for joining me, ma'am, on the show. But before I start talking about what's happening in Ukraine, Crimea, let's have a look at this short report.
Ukraine lurched towards breakup on Thursday. President Vladimir Putin rebuffed a warning from US President Barack Obama over Moscow's military intervention in Crimea, saying that Russia could not ignore calls for help from Russian speakers in Ukraine.
Я хочу вам ответственно заявить от имени Верхней Палаты, которая представляет интересы всех регионов Российской Федерации, в случае, если народ Крыма на референдуме проявит свою волю, примет такое решение о вхождении в состав России, мы, как Верхняя Палата парламента, безусловно поддержим это решение.
Lawmakers in the largely autonomous Russian-majority peninsula of Crimea voted in favor of leaving Ukraine and joining the Russian Federation, even as the US slapped visa restrictions on the separatists and began lining up financial sanctions against Moscow.
Since the Russian intervention, we've been mobilizing the international community to condemn this violation of international law and to support the people and government of Ukraine. This morning, I signed an executive order that authorizes sanctions on individuals and entities responsible for violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine or for stealing the assets of the Ukrainian people.
The parliament of Ukraine's autonomous Crimea region decided to hold a referendum on whether it should join Russia on March 16th. Pro-Moscow activists tried to storm the Ukraine Security Service building in the eastern Ukrainian city of Donetsk.
Wir sind Europäer, geografisch, historisch. Mit unserer Mentalität, wir sind auch Europäer. Wir sind leider weit entfernt von europäischen Standarten von Leben. Aber trotzdem, wir haben gehofft. Und wir wollen ein Teil von Europa werden.
Crimea, having a mostly ethnic Russian population, has been at the center of tensions following the fall of Ukraine's pro-Moscow president Viktor Yanukovych. Russia has been the dominant power in Crimea for most of the last 200 years, since it annexed the region in 1783. The region was, however, transferred by Moscow to Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union, in 1954. Some ethnic Russians see that as a historical wrong.
All right, Professor Chenoy, now history shows that how, the core issue gets diluted with happenings in international arena. That's perhaps what's happened in the case of Ukraine as well. The focus entirely now shifted from Kiev to Crimea. What do you have to say about the past few days, the developments that have taken place?
Well, look, actually the focus now is between the talks between President Putin on one hand and President Obama on the other, and the future of Ukraine and Crimea, as if these two people should decide the internal future, whereas actually the decision should be taken within Ukraine, keeping in mind the history, the politics and the culture, etc., something which Ukrainians should settle, but that is not going to happen. The reality is that Ukraine always has been polarized between one section of the people which are pro-Western, have different set of cultural and nationality, ethnic origins.
So there are deep divisions.
And the other side, which is very close to Russia. They're Russian-speaking, they're Crimean Tatars. They identify with Russia, and Crimea itself is an autonomous republic within earlier Soviet Union and now Ukraine.
Right.
Which was always part of Russian empires and Soviet Union, and was gifted by Khrushchev in 1954 to Ukraine, who never thought that Soviet Union would disintegrate. So when Ukraine has become independent, and there the politics again is either pro-Russian or pro-EU.
Yeah.
Half of them want to be part, especially the Western part, want to side with the EU, and they think, and there's also a deep economic crisis.
Absolutely.
Because it's not a gas producing and a very cold region, though it's a granary of the world, very big wheat producer. And there are these pipelines going across it from Russia to Europe.
Right.
So there are a lot of pipeline politics also. And the Western part thinks that by joining EU and IMF, getting a loan from there, they would get bailed out of their economic crisis.
Right.
Whereas the southern and eastern part believe that only Russia can help them get employment, jobs, etc. So this is what, and this division is being taken advantage of. And just the whole crisis itself started when the EU offered them a trade agreement.
A bailout
and
package.
A bailout, not really a bailout. Russia offered the bailout package.
Right.
And EU offered them a trade agreement.
So Ukraine was very close to bankruptcy. It still is, and that's how events started unfolding in November. But recently, the votes that took place in Crimea and now the referendum that we're looking at on the 16th of March, what does one make of that? What's really going to happen in that referendum? How decisive will it be?
Well, look, there are two events in the future. One, of course, is this referendum, which was supposed to be on March 30th, has been preponed. The referendum terms was to make Crimea a more autonomous republic. And there was no talk of complete secession as yet. But because of the way Yanukovych, who was pro-Russian, was deposed, the way in which things have got polarized, it can go further than just an autonomous republic. So, and how autonomous will have to be sort of looked at. The other thing is that there is also was to be an election in May, on May 16th. But that will also have to be preponed because they can't have a temporary president who came out of one of the protesters and became a president backed by protesters and the EU. So they'll have to have a free and fair elections, and they'll have to have talks with EU, Russia, Ukraine, and of course, America would like to be in the talks, but personally, I believe it should be with the local regional actors, and Ukraine should have an important position, as should Crimea.
Now, with sanctions imposed, and we are aware that US President Barack Obama did have an hour-long telephonic conversation. Of course, the finer details are not available with us, but what we do know is that Obama told Putin that, look, let's resolve the situation diplomatically. Let's just not take hasty decisions and see what you're doing first before you actually do that. Now, we all know what's Moscow's stand and what's Obama's stand. So a lot really depends on how these two leaders really take things forward as well.
Absolutely. But in this talk, Obama was forced to concede the fact that they cannot afford war. It will push them into a huge financial and economic crisis in not only Europe, Ukraine, Russia, but also in America again and world over, because they cannot have another war at this time. It's going to cost trillions of dollars. So that is out. Second is a question of sanctions. US said that they would be imposing unilateral sanctions if Russia intervened. Now they're saying, okay, let's resolve it diplomatically, because they know Russia has a power over large sections of Ukraine, and they can make it all stand still. And Russia said no to these talks until some of their conditions are met. And their conditions are linked to the breakup of the Soviet Union itself, when the US at that time, George Bush Sr., had promised that NATO and EU would not come on their borders and that Ukraine would still be a buffer state. And as soon as Russia became independent, they started in 1995 onwards wooing Ukraine and others to be part of EU.
Right.
So Russia is saying, we've had enough. You don't live up to your promises. When you are in a bit of a jam like you are today, where you don't want a war, you can't afford a war, you're offering negotiations. And when you want a war, as in Syria and Iraq, you went against us. So Putin is negotiating hard. And in this, the future of Ukraine is really at stake.
Absolutely. And coming to that, lastly, I want to talk to you about what the future of Ukraine really looks like, because these few days are certainly going to be very decisive. If we look at what's been happening since November, these coming few days are really critical.
Well, look, it is being the dominant narrative in Europe is that there can be a second Cold War, but the reality is there are different options of the future of Ukraine.
Right.
One option is being posed by the West that, okay, let it be one pro-West and one pro-Russian, and the geopolitics is determining it. But I think the option in the future should be on a federal independent Ukraine, where all these regions and the minorities within them, because Russians make 17% only,
right.
And there is a thought in Ukraine that we should not even have Russian language. So there's a majoritarianism there. There is a neo-Nazism there. So all that, they should be allowed to, if it becomes a secular, federal, plural republic, which it naturally is, it can survive. Otherwise, there will be a split, if not now, somewhere in the future.
All right, a split, if not now, somewhere in the future. But certainly the economic crisis is what it has to deal with right now. And perhaps we'll see some sort of a resolution coming in the next few days. Thank you so much, Professor Chenoy, for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with our viewers. With that, we're taking a very short break. Up ahead, China expresses deep concern to North Korea after a Chinese airplane crosses path of a rocket launched by the isolated state. I'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. North Korea turned down a proposal from South for the Red Cross organizations in each country to hold talks on further reunions of families separated by the division of the peninsula. The rejection came as South Korea announced plans to cut the size of its military and alleged that a recent missile launch by the North Korean side endangered a Chinese airliner. China rebuked its close ally North Korea for firing rockets during a military drill just minutes before a Chinese commercial airline carrying over 200 people flew in the area.
高度重视本国民用客机的安全。有关国家进行军事的训练或演习的时候应该按照国际的惯例采取措施来确保在 相关的空域或者海域的民用航空或者是航空器材或者是船舶的安全。
The plane, a China Southern Airlines jet with 220 passengers on board, was flying from Tokyo to the Chinese city of Shenyang when it passed through the same sky off east coast of North Korea that the rockets traveled. According to the South Korean Defense Ministry, officials in North had failed to notify any international aviation authorities about its planned launch.
탄도미사일이 이제 하락하는 그 과정에서 비행기가 지나갔지만 그런 안전도를 따졌을 때는 매우 심각할 수 있는 그런 수준이라고 보고.
North Korea dismissed the criticism, calling its missile and rocket tests defensive actions and boasting that its projectiles hit targets with precision while posing no threat to international air traffic. On Thursday, North Korea told the South that the circumstance and mood were not right to discuss further family reunions in an apparent reference to the joint military exercises the US and South have been conducting since February 24th. The North's missile and rocket tests were seen as a show of force in the face of drills, which Pyongyang has condemned as a rehearsal for an invasion of the North. Much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of the other international news of the week.
A Beijing-bound plane of Malaysia Airlines carrying 239 passengers, including 12 crew members on board, crashed into the South China Sea off the coast of Vietnam's Po Chu Island. Malaysia Airlines said people from 14 nationalities were among the passengers, including at least 152 Chinese, 38 Malaysians, 12 Indonesians, 6 Australians, 5 Indians and 3 Americans. The plane lost contact with air traffic control in Malaysia early on Saturday morning. Malaysia Airlines said it is currently working with the authorities, who have activated their search and rescue teams to locate the aircraft. Ships from countries closest to its flight path scoured a large search area for any wreckage. 5 Afghan soldiers were killed on Thursday in an airstrike by NATO-led forces in Afghanistan's eastern province of Logar. Officials said a total of 17 people had been injured. Coalition forces said the bombing was an accident. Afghan President Hamid Karzai met Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa on a 3-day visit aimed at boosting bilateral ties. This is Karzai's first official visit to Sri Lanka. The trip was rescheduled from February due to an attack on Afghan troops in Kunar on the eve of Karzai's departure to Colombo. Muammar Gaddafi's son Saadi arrived in Libya after being extradited from Niger. He was taken directly to a prison in Tripoli. The North African country had been seeking the extradition of Saadi, who fled to the southern neighbor nation after the toppling of Gaddafi in a NATO-backed uprising in 2011. The Libyan government also released a series of photographs showing Saadi wearing a blue prison uniform and having his head shaved in prison. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro led a commemoration procession to mark the first anniversary of the death of the former leader Hugo Chavez at the Hilltop Military Museum in Caracas on Wednesday. In a speech to mourn the death of Chavez, Maduro called for Venezuelan citizens to isolate the violent groups causing social damage. As part of the Women's History Month, the White House turned into an extravagant music concert hall on March 6th as soul singers spanning different generations performed for a Women of Soul concert. Performers included an impressive list of old and new legendary soul singers such as Melissa Etheridge, Patti LaBelle, Janelle Monáe, Aretha Franklin and Jill Scott.
Shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week. Here's all the sports action. Hong Kong businessman Carson Young was sentenced to 6 years in jail on Friday for money laundering in a high-profile case that law enforcement officials hailed as an important victory to combat money laundering in the global financial hub. Young, 54, who was found guilty by Hong Kong court on 5 counts of money laundering, some $93 million over several years, is a flamboyant, self-made millionaire and owner of British football club Birmingham City. Lawyers battling over whether world-famous track star Oscar Pistorius killed his girlfriend on purpose or by mistake returned Thursday to the fatal events of Valentine's Day in 2013 when Pistorius fired 4 bullets through a closed bathroom door at Riva Steenkamp. On the 4th day of the track star's murder trial in Pretoria, defense lawyer Barry Rokes cross-examined a neighbor who has testified that he heard shouting from Pistorius' house before the shooting. To mark the 100 days until the start of the 2014 World Cup, Brazil's stadiums and monuments were lit up on 4th March night in the colors of the Brazilian flag. Rio's iconic Maracana Stadium was also lit up in green and yellow. Brazil is currently racing against time to complete stadiums, airports, communications, infrastructure and transportation systems as the June 12th opening day approaches. Barcelona captain Carles Puyol will leave the club at the end of the season following a persistent battle with a knee injury. The 35-year-old defender, a fan's favourite for his battling displays, has been restricted to just 5 league games this season and has decided to end his time at Nou Camp. Puyol, who made his Barca debut in 1999, has the second highest number of appearances for the club with 593, only bettered by Xavi Hernandez. That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time, with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This week, I end the show with the grand 86th Academy Awards. The annual awards sprung a few surprises in some categories this time. What's being dubbed as one of the better shows? Here's a quick look at some of the top honours this year. Goodbye. Sunday saw the celebration of Hollywood's biggest achievements, the 86th Annual Academy Awards.
It's the Oscars. Ladies and gentlemen.
Comedian and talk show star Ellen DeGeneres returned as Oscar host in an appearance many saw as calculated to project a lighter, more affable tone for Hollywood's biggest night.
Well, we should get started. It's going to be an exciting night. Anything can happen. So many different possibilities. Possibility number 1, 12 Years a Slave wins Best Picture. Possibility number 2, you're all racists.
The slavery drama 12 Years a Slave won the Academy Award for Best Picture on making history as the first movie from a black director to win the film industry's highest honor in 86 years of the Oscars.
And the Oscar goes to 12 Years a Slave, Brad Pitt, Didi Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, Steve McQueen, and Anthony Katagis, producers.
Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I apologize for the paper, but otherwise I'll just bore you all. Well, maybe I'll do the same now, but I'll try not to. First, I'd like to thank the Academy. Thank you so much. There are a lot of people I need to thank, so I'll just push on. To my wonderful cast and crew, Plan B, Brad Pitt, who, without him, this film would just not have been made.
With 7 Oscars, including a history-making Best Director award for Alfonso Cuarón, the force of gravity exerted itself at the Oscars. Gravity, starring Sandra Bullock as a stranded astronaut, swept the technical awards like visual effects and cinematography.
Look, we need to get the hell out of here. Need some help there, man? No, don't wait for us. Man down.
Alfonso Cuarón won the Academy Award for Best Director for the visually groundbreaking Lost in Space spectacle.
Explorer's been hit.
It was the 7th Oscar of the evening for Gravity and 2nd for Cuarón himself.
Like any other human endeavor, making a film can be a transformative experience. And I want to thank Gravity because for many of us involved in this film, it was definitely a transformative experience. And it's good because it took so long that if not, it would be like a waste of time. And what it really sucks is that, well, for a lot of these people, that transformation was wisdom. For me, it was just the color of my hair.
Matthew McConaughey, in a validation of a remarkable career turnaround, won Best Actor for his portrayal of the homophobe-turned-AIDS victim-turned-treatment crusader Ron Woodroof, a role for which he lost 50 pounds.
First off, I want to thank God, because that's who I look up to. He's graced my life with opportunities that I know are not of my hand or any other human hand. He has shown me that it's a scientific fact that gratitude reciprocates.
While Cate Blanchett won the Best Actress Oscar for her acclaimed role as a socialite, unhinged by her husband's financial crimes in Woody Allen's Blue Jasmine. First-time winners Lupita Nyong'o and Jared Leto took supporting acting honours. The big loser of the night was director David O. Russell's 1970s crime caper American Hustle, which walked away empty-handed despite earning 10 nominations, the same number as Gravity.